Good afternoon and welcome to the San Antonio Chamber of Commerce United State of the City Address featuring Mayor Ron Nirenberg. My name is Stephanie Reyes, Vice President of Public Policy. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we get started, allow me to cover a few housekeeping reminders. Today's event is being recorded and will be made available on the San Antonio Chamber YouTube channel. Towards the end of our program, viewers will have an opportunity to engage the mayor and ask some questions live. To do so, please submit your questions using the function below the video viewer. We will do our very best to get to as many questions as possible. I would now like to introduce the San Antonio Chamber of Commerce President and CEO, Richard Pettis.
Thank you, Stephanie. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our annual United State of the City Address featuring our Mayor, Ron Nirenberg. Thank you to all for joining us today. Last month marked a year since the official declaration of a global pandemic, prompting stay-at-home orders that crippled entire industries, upended our lives, and made us all a little fearful for the future. There was no playbook to follow, no benchmark data to draw upon, and no lessons learned from businesses that had dealt with a pandemic before. But as we have seen throughout history, times of great adversity are dealt with through faith, adaptability, hope, innovation, and the ability to lean on our family, friends, and colleagues for support and reassurance. We witnessed this over the past year as many San Antonio businesses pulled from deep within to show strength, confidence, and to demonstrate agility in order to keep their doors open. Restaurants adjusted and began to focus on serving takeout, selling groceries, and/or offering outdoor dining in a socially distanced atmosphere. Schools shifted to providing instruction online and in hybrid models. And businesses that could quickly converted to a remote business work model in order to keep their work moving and their teams employed. And our local leaders took decisive action to slow the spread of the virus. Here we are 1 year later, eyes wide open, navigating our way forward, more resilient and more united than ever. Every new person who receives their vaccine brings a smile and hope that things are indeed changing for the good, and maybe even returning to something that feels familiar. With 2020 in the rearview mirror, we all are looking straight ahead at what is next for the Alamo City in the coming months. To that end, each year the San Antonio Chamber of Commerce partners with the Alamo Asian American Chamber of Commerce and the San Antonio Hispanic Chamber of Commerce to host our mayor and reflecting on the year that was and to give us a clear view of what is on the horizon for our great city. Under our mayor's leadership, the city created one of the largest rental and mortgage assistance funds in the nation, along with robust efforts to retrain our workforce, provide for small business relief, and deal with issues in relation to our city's digital divide. Today, Mayor Nirenberg will discuss the latest developments in our municipal government, including the city's response to the winter storm, his thoughts on the May 1st ballot, plans for digital infrastructure investment, and updates on his signature SA Ready to Work program. The mayor will also take questions directly from you, so make sure, please, submit those questions in the questions and answer box. As we begin, I must take a brief moment to make a few important acknowledgments. First, I would like to say how incredibly proud and appreciative I am of my team here at the San Antonio Chamber of Commerce for their hard work over the past year. They have kept on top of all the latest developments regarding the pandemic, pushing out information on the state-mandated opening and closing of our businesses, the latest safety protocols, key information on where businesses can secure personal protective equipment, and they've done so while working from home, juggling family responsibilities, toilet paper shortages, runs on gas and groceries, and all the while adapting to new technologies and ways of doing business to help you, our members, stay informed and engaged. Team, thank you for your hard work. I would also like to share a heartfelt thank you to our more than 1,850 businesses that are members of the San Antonio Chamber of Commerce. Your commitment to our chamber and to the business community has gotten us to this point, and we are ready to press on and put all of this behind us. And also a very special thank you to our event sponsors. Without your support, our special events would not be possible. So I'd like to acknowledge them now. Our gold sponsors for today's event are Toyota Motor Manufacturing and AT&T. Our silver sponsors for today's event are University Health System, New Star Energy, Sun Construction, Nationwide Insurance, Silver Eagle Beverages, BCFS, and Port San Antonio. And our bronze sponsors for today are the Zachary Corporation, the H&TB Corporation, CEC Civil Engineering Consultants, and Security Service Federal Credit Union. Mayor, these businesses employ thousands of people in San Antonio, and we say thank you. Thank you so much for your continued support of the Chamber. I would now like to introduce the Chamber's 2021 Chair of the Board to introduce our guest of honor. Hope Andrade is the co-founder and partner of Go Rio San Antonio River Cruises. She's also a former Texas Secretary of State and a lifelong advocate for San Antonio and its business community. Hope is a successful entrepreneur, a thoughtful business leader, and has served as a state of Texas government official together for more than 3 decades. She has many firsts, serving as Texas's first Latina Secretary of State, Texas Workforce Commissioner, and Texas Department of Transportation Commissioner. As an entrepreneur who has created and grown multiple companies, Hope brings a broad business perspective to the Chamber, with particular expertise in healthcare, in transportation, in workforce, and in economic development. We are proud, extremely proud, to work under her leadership and carry out her bold One City initiative, which is focused on recovery and bringing visitors and locals back to the heart of the city and get San Antonio back on its feet. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our 2021 Chair of the Board, Hope Andrade. Madam Chair, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Richard, for that kind introduction and for the opportunity to introduce our mayor this afternoon. Mayor Ron Nirenberg was reelected to a second term on June 8, 2019. Mayor Nirenberg has guided San Antonio through the COVID-19 pandemic with calm determination. His steady demeanor, commitment to following the science, and his ongoing effort to keep residents fully informed have given comfort and confidence to San Antonians as our city has coped with the devastation brought by the coronavirus. He was first elected to represent District 8 on the San Antonio City Council in 2013. During his 2 terms, he championed smart city and regional planning, inclusive economic development, environmental stewardship, fiscal responsibility, and governmental accountability. Under his leadership as mayor, the city's budget has been adopted with a focus on equity to ensure that all parts of the city have the same level of services and infrastructure. He is focused on making key investments necessary to accommodate the growth of San Antonio, which is expected to nearly double in population by 2040. This forward-looking approach drives the mayor's vision of a compassionate community with a globally competitive economy. In 2018, the United States Conference of Mayors recognized Mayor Nirenberg with a Small Business Advocate Award for his efforts to encourage entrepreneurism. Mayor Ron Nirenberg.
Good morning. Good afternoon. Hope, thank you very much for the introduction, Madam Chair, and Richard, and to the Chamber. Thank you very much for having me today. It is a pleasure to join you, albeit virtually. The United States of the City event has become a notable San Antonio tradition, and I expect that next year we will finally gather again the old-fashioned way in person. We have endured a wild ride since our last conversation. We've now entered our 2nd year of the COVID-19 pandemic, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak about the city's recovery efforts, and I appreciate all that you've done as business leaders to support our community in these difficult times. Despite the challenges and the setbacks, you continue to embody our city's spirit of service and sacrifice. And there is no denying by anyone that our city was hit hard. We've recorded more than 208,000 COVID-19 cases, and we've lost 3,200 of our neighbors and family and friends. But now, good news is finally arriving. More than 340,000 San Antonio residents are fully vaccinated, and more than 545,000 people have received at least 1 dose. Our community positivity rate is the lowest of all major metropolitan areas in Texas, down to 2.1%. County Judge Nelson Wolf and I continue to push the state and FEMA for more vaccines now. Through every challenge and setback, we've seen the very best of San Antonio, as you said, Richard, from frontline workers to first responders to neighbors helping neighbors. And while stark inequalities and inequities have been laid bare as a result of COVID-19, we have been able to rally together as a community to make sure that we don't go back simply to the way things were. We've stood as one and have declared that we will come out of this stronger than before. In June of 2020, before we got into the height of the summer, my council colleagues and I came together to forge the city's COVID-19 recovery and resiliency plan. We created a robust program to address housing security, workforce, small business, and digital inclusion needs. As of today, we've invested $133.5 million into an emergency housing assistance program to provide rental, mortgage, utility, and cash assistance to friends and neighbors who are facing extreme financial hardship. Through this program, we've helped more than 83,000 families. In the wake of this pandemic, more than 150,000 San Antonio residents, as you know, our neighbors, filed for unemployment. To get folks back to work, we established a free workforce training and education program, Train for Jobs SA, for displaced workers to increase their skills and capacity to secure higher paying, in-demand jobs that will improve their chances of thriving in a post-COVID economy. While participants are enrolled in a training program, they receive a living wage stipend to help eliminate the financial burden of being out of the workforce. Last month, I ran into a resident who had lost her job as a result of the pandemic. She's currently enrolled in our Train for Jobs SA program, working toward her bookkeeping certificate. While enrolled, she's earning a living wage stipend and receiving valuable experience maintaining records for the university health system, confirming appointments for residents who arrive at Wonderland Mall to receive their COVID-19 vaccine. And there already is substantial interest in our workforce efforts here locally and nationally. More than 4,500 of our residents have completed the in-depth intake process, and 2,330 of those residents are already enrolled in the program. It's worth noting that 72% of the current enrollees are women, who, as we know, have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic. Knowing that one year of workforce development training would not be enough to ease the burden faced by so many families in our community, I asked San Antonio voters to commit a fraction of existing sales tax to build upon the foundation laid by our current workforce program, creating SA Ready to Work. And in November, nearly 77% of San Antonians agreed we must do more to invest in career opportunities for our neighbors. This initiative will begin in the fall and could serve as many as 10,000 residents annually over the next 4 years. But beyond boosting our local workforce, we must support our local employers. Small businesses, as you know, are the backbone of the San Antonio economy. So last year, we allocated $42.7 million in grants, programs, and services to help them survive during these unprecedented times. Some $32 million were allocated as grants for over 1,100 micro businesses and 68 nonprofits. We also utilized funds to forgive 56 small business loans. In addition to what we were able to allocate last year, we approved an additional $14 million for our hospitality grants program with a targeted focus on the restaurant and bar industry, bringing our combined efforts for hospitality industry to $22.4 million. To date, several hundred food and beverage businesses have been already awarded grants in the last year. In the coming days, we expect to know exactly how much San Antonio will receive from the recently passed American Rescue Act. The current projection is $326 million directly to the city, and other funds are expected as well. We will be providing more help for small businesses as the economy picks up steam again, and we will have more time and flexibility to use the funds as we've been directed. And to be sure, we are starting to see signs of blossoming of economic momentum. The numbers are still being tabulated, but Visit San Antonio estimates that hotel occupancy for March was more than 60%. That's compared to 40.4% last March when the pandemic first hit. Visit San Antonio reports that from 2017 to 2019, March occupancy numbers were roughly 76.5% or higher. As you know, the NCAA Women's Final Four was just hosted here in San Antonio, all of it, and had about $27.2 million in economic impact and accounted for 35,000 hotel room nights. Our recovery initiatives will fortify our ongoing economic development efforts as well, which have already resulted in over $1 billion in new business investments over the last couple of years, such as Toyota, Aishin, and Navistar, to name a few. In recent days, 3 tech companies chose San Antonio for headquarters expansion, including Skipcart, bringing additional 250 jobs to the city. And last week, we locked in the 2022 Warrior Games, the Defense Department's version of the Olympics, celebrating our wounded warriors. And I expect to be talking about more good news in economic development as early as next week. The work that Jenna Cicero Herrera has undertaken alongside public and private partners, including many of you here today, will provide long-lasting opportunities for generations of San Antonio families. On the subject of digital connectivity, it's more crucial than ever for virtual schooling and accessible important services. We initiated a program that would provide internet access to the most marginalized communities in San Antonio. We've been working with our local school districts to provide equipment and internet access to 20,000 students to help mitigate the digital divide issues in 50 high priority neighborhoods. We know this was an issue before the pandemic, and it is a serious issue during the pandemic, and we're devoting to changing that. This past November, San Antonio voters approved landmark long-term investments in early childhood education, workforce development, and enhanced public transit, allowing our community to chart a path forward to a more bright and prosperous future. And yes, we did all of this without raising taxes. So as I close the opening portion of our event today, I want to note that if our community has the strength to do so much in such a short period of time, with a global pandemic doing everything it can to hold us back, I'm confident that with generations of families here in San Antonio looking towards leadership, they will thrive in San Antonio as we respond. We will get through this. Our faith will be stronger for it. And it has been the privilege of a lifetime to be able to serve alongside you during these difficult times. So let's continue to work together with a focus on healthy people, a healthy economy, and healthy opportunities for a healthy future in San Antonio. I'm very grateful for the Chamber's work throughout the year, our partnership, and my hat is off to you, Chair Andrade, for all the significant work you've done through multiple sectors and opportunities in our city. It's been great to work with you. I'm honored to be here, and I look forward to our conversation today. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Mayor, thank you so much for your opening comments. We've got a bunch of folks that have submitted questions. I've got a few of my own that I'd like to go ahead and begin with. So let's jump right into it. By April 19th, any adult Texan who would like a COVID-19 vaccination will be eligible to receive one. How has the city prepared for the increased demand for vaccinations? And are those efforts sustainable, or are additional resources and assistance needed?
Thank you, Richard. Well, as you know, the judge and I have been working the phones and banging the tables to get more vaccines in here to San Antonio. And I'm pleased that we recently got a huge boost in the vaccines from the federal government in cooperation with the Texas Department of Emergency Management, NIM-KID chief over there. And a lot of those vaccines were Johnson & Johnson, and they're being administered right now. So it's kind of a double boost when you get a Johnson & Johnson allocation. So that's very good. The other side of this is that while our supply isn't quite meeting demand, we are going to continue to advocate for those increasing supplies. Our situation today is dramatically improved versus 6 months ago. And the numbers I shared with you with regard to the number or the population that's been vaccinated actually does not even include the VA or our military community, which have been doing their own vaccine administration. We know that we're well over 600,000 if you include the VA vaccine administration process. With regard to the sustainability of our efforts, I will say that we can always use more volunteers. So if you're interested, please do contact Metro Health. But our primary focus is to increase supplies here in San Antonio. We are encouraged by the increased production of vaccines, along with our good conversations with the governor and with TDEM and with the White House. So the situation improves every single day, and I encourage everyone who has not gotten an appointment yet to go ahead and do so and sign up for that vaccine alert system as well. Text vaccine or vacuna to 55000, and you will be directly notified when any of our public health providers get additional appointments to be registered for.
Excellent, thank you. And along those lines, Mayor, just so you know, we hosted an event here a couple of days ago with Dr. Anita Kurian, and she was fantastic. And it was all about what the businesses need to do to get folks back in their store, get employees back in the workforce. And it was just replete with excellent information, some of the stuff that you've touched upon, and, doing away with those myths. There's still just so much noise out there. We wanted to get to really what's happening. And so a lot of that stuff is available on our website, CDC, et cetera. So thank you. So you touched upon a mass vaccination facility or a site. Are we still pushing for that? And if we get one, what will that do for us?
Yeah, so the federal government is well aware of the 4 mass vaccination sites that we already have operational. In fact, UHS and Standing Up Wonderland Mall was one of the first effective mass vaccination sites in the country. So they know we have the infrastructure. And what we have been doing now is to advocate for additional supplies. We'll take the personnel teams too, but what we really need are the supplies, because we can plug in additional fuel doses into our existing vaccine infrastructure at those 4 sites. I do want to say thank you, Richard, to you and your team for advocating for those additional supplies. We now have a strong bipartisan coalition along with our business community that are calling for more supplies. I think that's been effective for us to see the increases we already have, but we got to continue to bang that drum here for the next several weeks. And just really quick, if I can react to your meeting with Dr. Kurian, we have crossed a threshold now with the eligibility of vaccines and the availability of vaccine appointments. So again, with the precautions that we're taking and that our community has been, quite responsible about, mask wearing, things like that, people can go live their lives. There's some modifications. Obviously, we have to be cautious, but there's a lot of things that we can do with confidence as long as we're being reasonable. And so things are starting to ease up quite a bit. And as long as we can keep on track and get those vaccines and get them into people's arms, we're going to be in good shape.
Excellent. Now, let me just say that, the daily updates that you've been doing along with Nelson, members, Dr. Kurian, Dr. Wu, folks from University Health. I mean, all those things have helped us instill that confidence that we all have been lacking for a long time. And then that information, that clear information that we keep pushing out, vaccinations, that's getting us exactly to where we need to be. So thank you for doing that. It really has helped, our psyche very, very much.
Thanks, Richard.
Next question. So in February, you announced the formation of a committee on emergency preparedness, which you tasked with studying the preparedness and response of our public utilities and to make recommendations on future preparedness efforts. What can you share about the committee's work?
Great. Well, thank you. And I first want to say thank you to the committee members. It is a select committee chaired by former council member Reed Williams, who I think many of you know very well. It also includes General Ed Rice and Lisa Tatum, who is a former president of the Texas Bar Association, along with 4 of my colleagues on the city council. And their work is ongoing, and it really centers around 2 questions. What happened, and how do we make sure that we're better prepared in the future? And so they are having weekly meetings, and they're collecting questions from the community that people want to have addressed. And so if you're interested in that, there is a website set up at sanantonio.gov if you want to send in some questions. But so far, they've been meeting weekly, and those meetings happen at 10 a.m. on Fridays. You can watch them; they're live streamed, and they've thus far separated the categories of questions, and also started to field or started to work those with three areas: CPS Energy, SAWS, and our EOC. So essentially, we're looking at how we were prepared, what happened in the communication response, and then ultimately the total response and evaluation of the effort. And this is going to go on for several weeks. They're going to come up with recommendations to make to the different entities, SAWS, CPS, and to our emergency operations. And we'll begin to implement those through those bodies. So I would encourage you to get involved in that. It's going to be important work for us to ensure that of the things that we can address locally, that we're doing so, and we're in a better position should we see a situation like that arise again in terms of a winter and energy disaster.
Excellent, excellent, very good. Let's move on. You, or the city, recently commissioned a San Antonio small business ecosystem assessment. I know that was just rolled out. Tell us a little bit about that, and what are some of the findings?
Sure. So the report itself, the analysis that was done was to take a look at our small business ecosystem, particularly with the lens on some of the smaller businesses, along with businesses owned by residents of color, and those that are struggling to get capital, things like that, to thrive in this environment. But it was inclusive of the entire small business community, and it's got some interesting findings. I'll start by saying that we know here through the census portion of this report that there's 34,000 small businesses and approximately 145,000 sole proprietorships in our community. They comprise roughly 34% of local workforce. The study found that total businesses revenue and the businesses themselves obviously were impacted greatly by the pandemic. A full 45% of revenue, and then 34% of total businesses impacted by COVID-19. What's even more striking in this report, though, is how they disproportionately impacted Black-owned businesses as well as Hispanic-owned businesses, particularly in those that are neighborhood-based industries or those that are in service-based industries like construction, wholesale, merchant wholesale, and transportation services. In addition, something that was underscored, particularly in Black and Hispanic-owned businesses, but this runs the gamut through small business, is the need for capital. In fact, there's an $8.3 billion total in unmet need for capital in small business in San Antonio that we're, hoping to connect through our commercial lending industry to those businesses. Small businesses need capital, they need space, they need workforce, but the unmet capital need is very striking. And then there's, of course, it underscores what we know is true about our recovery efforts, and that is we have to ensure that our small businesses have lifelines because they comprise the community identity, the fabric of San Antonio. So much of San Antonio's cultural identity is derived from our small business community. So that has underscored our efforts that I mentioned in the recovery program, roughly $42.7 million allocated towards our small business community. I mentioned the $14 million that we recently approved for the hospitality program. I also mentioned our small business advocacy committee. We created a 15-member committee to be comprised of small business owners and entrepreneurs at the city council, so that we have a constant feedback mechanism through our small business community to advocate on policy, to address issues of concern economically. Certainly when there's a crisis like this, their feedback is critically important. So we're doing a number of efforts as a result of the findings of that report. And I think bottom line is that we know we've done significant work, but our work is far from over when it comes to relief of the small business community, especially in light of these the results in this report.
Excellent. Very good. A lot of work to be done for sure. As you might remember, I come from a small business background. My family my daddy started a landscape business when I was a child, and thankfully the business is still going strong, but indeed they struggled like many businesses. But thankfully they're back on a trajectory, as many businesses are, and are looking for employees and excited to be back to work.
Yeah,
so good stuff.
That's great.
So let's look back for a minute. In November, of course, San Antonio voters, as you talked about a moment ago, overwhelmingly approved SA Ready to Work. You and I were talking right before the broadcast began about the presentation that happened yesterday at the City Council meeting. Tell us a little bit about the advisory board, the program itself, timelines. Just bring us up to date on that program.
Sure, and again, I think this was with considerable foresight from our business community as well as our civic community working together to create workforce development as a priority here in San Antonio, recognizing that every economist from here to the other side of the world is noting that the COVID-19 pandemic economic impact is significant, and that job loss is not to rebound in the same way and not very quickly in the same way either. So we embarked on a workforce development effort to ensure that our workforce here in San Antonio, which was suffering, had a bridge to careers, to jobs that are available right now in San Antonio. The skills gap that we've been talking about for years that came and that generated programs like SA Works was on clear display in every city in the country. The skills gap is a problem before the pandemic. It's an even bigger problem during and after the pandemic. So our SA Ready to Work program is that second phase that will begin in September, and we'll be building upon the current workforce recovery efforts that are ongoing with the Train for Jobs SA program. We've appointed a board, and they're made up of local employers, workforce training experts, and participants, trade and labor organizations, community organizations, et cetera. The primary role of this workforce advisory board, I'll mention 5 big things that they have to be working on. Number one, they have to identify and align themselves with in-demand occupations, the real world economy. Where are jobs being produced in San Antonio today and in the future? Second is fostering alignment of the in-demand skill sets and the training programs with those career fields. We want people to enroll in this program and get trained for construction, if that's the job that they're seeking. And that we have thousands of jobs in construction, thousands of jobs in healthcare, thousands of jobs in technology that are unfilled because we don't have the labor available. So we want to align the skill training program with those career fields. The third thing is that they also have to recommend the allotment of certificates versus degrees. This is a program that's training for skills, for jobs today. Some of those skill sets require short-term certifications. Some of them require more advanced certifications or even degrees. We need that board that's made up of employers and experts to allot the slots for those students or for those workers. The fourth thing is they need to recommend levels of wraparound services. Again, this is not just a training program. This is a program to ensure that folks that are enrolled in training stay in the program. And so we're anticipating what other services, financial literacy, remediation might be needed. And they're going to recommend that kind of programming. And then the fifth thing is to serve as program ambassadors. We want this to be robust. As you know, it's a 5-year program. And we want to make sure that the community is aware of it, because there is such a dramatic need for training in our city when we had such a level of underemployment prior to the pandemic and a level of displaced work during the pandemic. So over the next couple of months, we're going to be adopting a program policy and budget, and then we are about to release the RFPs for the program providers. You may have heard that part of this program is to hire 60 some odd city employees. That's not the case. We've recalibrated. We don't need this to be a top-heavy city bureaucracy. We just need some folks to be doing oversight at city level. We've got program providers out in the real world economy to conduct the actual program. So we're estimating probably 10 or 11 folks to be hired at the city, overseeing all the robust work by the actual program providers, those organizations that will be responding to the RFP. But I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the foundation we're building on, Richard, if I can just take a minute. The Train for Jobs program is the foundation of Ready to Work. And so far, this program, again, really got underway in a bona fide way in November when the training started. So just a few months in, we have already had 4,594 residents that have completed all the necessary intake and are eligible to enroll in Train for Jobs SA. The intake process is intensive because we have to work with folks to remediate, maybe get a high school equivalency, and then also identify the career field. Already 2,330 individuals enrolled in the workforce training program. Get this, 72% of current participants are women, 63% of participants are Hispanic, 17% of participants are Black. This is reaching folks who have disproportionately less opportunity, and we're getting opportunities to the communities that desperately need them. And I can go into a little bit more here. There's already 214 folks that have completed the program. We're still early into it. Those are more short-term training programs that they've completed. 124 are already in jobs. They've been in the job for more than 3 months. We don't count those until they've reached the 3-month mark. So we've already got several folks that have been in the short-term program and they've been working for several months. So I'm really grateful for the community support on this. I'm very optimistic. And hearing the comments of those outside of San Antonio, what San Antonio is doing on workforce should give everybody a lot of confidence about where our economic trajectory is today.
Well, those numbers are impressive, and excited that it's indeed hitting right where we have the biggest need. Do you happen to know what are some of those kinds of jobs, those short-term jobs that these folks are in?
I knew you were going to ask that, and I didn't get the specific jobs yet, but I will say the targeted industries. We have 5 targeted industries that are a result of the EDF's SA jobs report. And what's good about, or what's one of the great things about this program is that we're going to remain linked to the SA EDF jobs report. So as those industries may change, we're going to keep those training programs aligned to the industries that are hiring folks. So the 5 industries right now that are top emerging industries: healthcare, construction, technology, advanced manufacturing, and financial services. Those are the 5 big ones right now. That's not exhaustive, but those are the ones that have the highest trajectory of job growth and currently the highest amount of unfilled jobs in which they need labor.
Excellent, excellent, very good. Okay, sounds like a lot of good things going, a lot of good momentum, and looking forward, of course, to the new program kicking off in the fall. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the May 1st election. Right around the corner, and there are a couple of ballot initiatives, but the one that I wanted to talk to, and the charter amendment, is to expand the use of general obligation dollars to include other priorities such as affordable housing. Tell us a little bit about your thoughts on why this is so important, and what can we expect as we go through that identification process, that project identification process in the future?
Well, first, I think all we have to do is look a few miles up or east to see what happens if the supply of housing gets out of control. And so we need to be on guard to protect our competitive advantage here in San Antonio, which is cost of living and the up until recently affordability of housing. And as you might remember, in 2017, I put together a housing policy task force. And one of their key findings was that there are already 165,000 households in San Antonio that were cost burdened. Those are pre-pandemic numbers. And so we know that number today is even higher. And what that means is that families disproportionately in San Antonio, a growing number, are having a greater challenge meeting the other necessary costs to keep their household going: food, medicine, things like that. And so as a result, we have adopted a housing framework with affordability at the center. Just like water and energy and roadways, housing is infrastructure, and it's part of our economic trajectory. So the charter amendment that is on the ballot allows the city to have more flexibility in how it chooses to use, or how voters choose to use bond dollars. Currently, San Antonio voters have the most restrictive bond language of any major city in Texas, meaning that voters have fewer choices being able to be presented to them than their peer cities who utilize bonds for a greater range of public purposes, which are not explicitly, as in San Antonio's case, tied to public works. So through the charter amendment, it may facilitate our efforts to provide for housing options, to stimulate the housing market, and to make sure that we retain our competitive cost advantage when it comes to housing. It also allows for to do other kinds of infrastructure projects if voters want to. In some cases, economic development initiatives, again, always having to be approved by voters. So again, this is about making sure that we have choices as a community, that voters have choices, and that we can get ahead of what has become a housing crisis in a lot of major cities in Texas.
Excellent. Well said. And there is no doubt that housing is an essential service nowadays. And so I think that focus by you and your colleagues on the city council makes a ton of sense. And the chamber is going through our process to review that amendment, the charter amendment. It is my suspicion that we'll be supportive of it come a couple weeks.
Great. Thank you, Rich. Let us know if you need anything.
Of course, of course. I want to remind everyone to please put your questions in the chat function. Our mayor has graciously agreed to answer any and all questions. We've only got a couple more that we've produced ourselves, but we're going to get into the public questions momentarily. So let me zip through those real quick, and then we'll move on to the public questions. So city staff, going back to the bonds again, what is that process that we all as citizens are going to use to be able to get our thoughts and ideas into projects going forward? I know that the election is not till 2022, but what can folks expect and how can they get involved?
So you're talking about the bond program. So we recently had a goal setting session for the city council, which really is the first downbeat of the bond program process. And as you might remember, under our former city manager, Cheryl Scully, the bond program process became quite a community-driven process with committees, et cetera. That process is going to remain. We're still going to have committees ultimately vetting what ends up on the ballot in terms of bond programs. And that, again, is a election that we intend to call in May of 2022. But in that goal setting session, I asked the city council and the city staff to take a step back just a minute and talk about strategic outcomes. Because as you know, we have the American Rescue Plan. We are likely to have a significant infrastructure package at the federal level. We also have our relief efforts locally. And then, of course, we have the bond that's coming up. What are the strategic outcomes so that we can align all of our efforts and get the most bang for our buck in terms of leveraged projects, in terms of strategic goals for the city? And so I asked our community, our city council, our city to address two things in particular. One is connectivity, both physical and digital. So how do we make sure that we're connecting people, connecting homes and residences to places of employment, again, in terms of transportation, but also our digital infrastructure, which is only going to increase in importance. The second is coming out of the pandemic. How do we make sure that we're also achieving public health outcomes to become a more resilient community? And so public health infrastructure is also an area I think we're going to emphasize in the upcoming bond. That would be things like improving parks, expanding our creekway system, making for accessible public facilities, things like that. So it's two areas of strategic focus. But in terms of public involvement, you can expect a fairly similar process to be underway as we get into the summer months.
Excellent. Very good. Very good. So you talked a little bit about broadband, and we know that the pandemic laid bare the fact that broadband internet service is an essential service and must be addressed in order for our business community and our citizens alike to be successful going forward. You have longtime championed resources to fill the digital divide. How does the city plan to work? And you touched on it a little bit, but kind of give us that framework. I mean, we know we have a problem. What can we do? And I say we collectively, the business community, citizens, the city, do to make us take that next step in regard to that infrastructure?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And I think it starts with recognizing that the expertise in telecom really lies within our industry. So the conversations to advance our pilot program, for instance, that I mentioned in my opening remarks, has really been done in lockstep with industry. What we have been doing is to, number one, work together collaboratively to lean on our strengths, but also to ensure that we can identify those areas that need access to broadband. So we've been tied in with the expertise of our industry representatives from the start, and they have been, again, in lockstep with us in our community equity efforts. And I'll just name some things that we're doing right now. We've urged our industry partners to participate in the federal funding process that allows for internet providers to reduce the cost of broadband service for eligible customers. We do expect some major headway through the recently passed American Rescue Plan, which has a significant portion devoted to broadband. The same is true at the state level. As you know, Governor Abbott has made the digital divide a significant initiative as well that he is focused on. We're also working with our state industry partners to pass legislation that would be helpful, in particular HB5 and SB5, that would create a state broadband office. It would also conduct mapping of broadband services access across the state, and we have data to contribute to that. And finally, would implement a grants program to incentivize development of broadband infrastructure in underserved areas. And then let me just mention that our pilot program is off to a good start. We recognize digital inclusion to be a challenge prior to the pandemic. And so we are using the pandemic where digital infrastructure and access to broadband are a critical need to do something about that. So we've been targeting 50 underserved neighborhoods and trying to reach 20,000 students with broadband access because they're going to need that access even when we're out of the pandemic and, for doing homework and bridging the homework gap, as they call it too. So good efforts in collaboration with the industry and the community and the city in our digital infrastructure efforts. And you wouldn't expect anything less from San Antonio.
That's right. That's right. Thank you. Very good. So we're going to now shift and I'm going to give you some other questions from our viewers. And the first one is from Richard Troy, and it's about public transit. What are your thoughts on the public transit system, and what role will alternative modes of transportation play in the road to recovery?
Thank you for the question, Richard. And I think it's as significant a priority now as it ever was, the importance of a robust transportation network. And I do want to say again, thank you to Chair Andrade, who did incredible work to help us come up with the plan that we got passed in November. As you know, the 1/8 cent will finally be going to VIA starting in 2026. Where it belongs, and we are closer to fully funding a public transportation network than we ever have been before. And I'll also say thank you to Fernando Reyes, a former chair of the chamber, who is now leading VIA, a successor to former Chair Andrade. Now, where are we going from here? I think we have a significant opportunity. Number one, San Antonio has been underfunded with regard to the federal infrastructure dollars that we would need to initiate a multimodal transportation system with regard to transit. We have a plan already. You may know it as Connect SA or Keep SA Moving. We're going to be initiating that plan because Now we also have guaranteed revenue through that 1/8 cent sales tax that's coming in starting in 2026, coupled with the infrastructure package that we expect and the fact that Secretary Buttigieg recognizes Texas to be underserved with regard to transit dollars. We think we have a significant opportunity now to advance a transit plan for San Antonio.
I did not
with
know
regard
that. That puts us in a good spot, I think, for sure.
Absolutely. There is an approach by the Secretary of Transportation's office to look at where dollars have not gone for transit. And so, there's one great example right here in San Antonio to bring our fair share of transit dollars home. And the last thing I'll say is that active transportation, our linear creekway system, a bicycle master plan, a pedestrian system is also critically important. It's part of public health infrastructure. And we view that, as I mentioned, through connectivity to be one major element that can be moved forward in our infrastructure recovery efforts.
Well, Mayor, I think the Secretary's focus on those underserved areas it has to come directly from his experience as being a mayor before, just like you've seen as mayor and I've seen as a council member. You got to put the money where it's most needed, and you got to go where the most need is, and those are those underserved areas. So I'm great. I'm really happy to hear that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and we finally, Richard, have our ticket to dance that we've been missing for so many years. I know there was a consternation. We had to take some recovery effort before we could get to transit in terms of the sales tax, but the truth of the matter is that boat is done. That transit dollar is coming home to the transit system. And that was the key element that we have always been missing in this community, is having that vote for that transit revenue stream to be able to now participate in the grant programs at the federal level. We have that ticket to the show, and we're going to go to the show.
Excellent. Well, we are your partner, so let us know what we can do to help. And Fernando Reyes, of course, is wonderful and great businessman. So great leadership.
With federal experience.
Yes, that's right. So another question from our friend Steve Atkins. Steve asks, when might we more fully utilize our convention center? That is, by expanding capacity so that it better supports the group and convention industry, and therefore brings much more utilization of our lodging facilities, which generate tax income for our city. So expansion sounds like. Yeah,
well, it's a great question, Steve. And I think we're almost there. In fact, I was having a conversation with Eric, our city manager, along with Dr. Bridger just this week about that. So we are working on a transition plan right now. Obviously, we control our destiny with regard to some of the health protocols that we can put in place there. So mask wearing will probably be still featured in those facilities, but you're going to start to see some easing of occupancy very soon. The truth of the matter is a lot of that will be dictated by the visitor and convention industry, and we're already getting requests and making bookings. So I feel very good about that. I talk to my peers in Texas almost on a daily basis, and their projections in terms of herd immunity are quite encouraging with regard to the vaccination process. And San Antonio is keeping up with its peers. We've been able to actually vaccinate our portion of the community as quickly as any city in the state. So we're doing well, and I anticipate that the summer is going to see a very robust recovery economically when it comes to visitor traffic and the convention business.
Well, I can tell you from my perch here downtown at our office, which oversees the Riverwalk, and I see traffic, and that is a good thing. I see people, I see walking, I see, activity again, and I'm just so excited to see that once more.
And the residual impact it has on the restaurants and other small businesses in the area. The other thing you see also, which might be a surprise to some folks, are masks. They're still wearing masks. So the message is, go live your life, enjoy the activities of the city, take some precautions like wearing a mask, and we can do this together. Unfortunately, that was the story from very early on too. But we've seen finally this kind of become part of the psyche and the mentality of folks, is that we can do stuff as long as we're playing it safe.
Excellent. Thank you for that. So we're coming to the end. So I've got enough time for one more question. And this one is from Stephanie Morrison. Stephanie Morrison. And she asks, as the nation watches the George Floyd trial unfold, what are your plans/thoughts to improve relationships between the SAPD and the San Antonio community?
Yeah, well, thank you very much for that. It was Stephanie Morris. Okay, yeah, thank you, Stephanie, for that question. I think, so one of my primary responsibilities as mayor, which I think directly goes to your question, is to ensure a good faith environment for negotiations of the next collective bargaining agreement. And that's what we're doing right now. So, again, our community has priorities with regard to discipline reform and transparency reform, and that is our agenda in the negotiations. And so my role is to ensure that environment for good faith negotiations can occur. That's what we are doing. We're also embarking through our city management and the police department an effort to have community listening sessions and town halls to hear feedback about the department and services provided. We're going to continue to do that. I will say that San Antonio has enjoyed a very professional relationship and one of the highest quality police departments in the country. Are we immune from challenges? Absolutely not. But we need to continue to build on success, address the challenges, and with regard to transparency and discipline reform, the ability for the chief to have the executive authority to weed out bad cops. That's what we're trying to do at the negotiating table, and do that in good faith.
Excellent. Very good. Well, Mayor, thank you so much for joining us every year and telling us what's going on and being very straightforward and honest as you have been. It's refreshing, and it really continues to give us that confidence that we need to go forward. So with that, I'll throw it over to you, see if you have any last comments for our viewers.
Thank you very much, Richard and Chair Andrade, and to the membership of the San Antonio Chamber, and to the Asian Chamber and Hispanic Chamber for hosting this event today. It's been a pleasure to be with you again. It's hard to describe the year that we have seen in San Antonio and across the country, and it has been extraordinarily challenging for every business, every member of the community. But I will say that as we look back on what has occurred, you've seen the very best of San Antonio. We have a unique DNA in the city where we rally together, we stand from one another, we pull through in crisis times together. And that's what you've seen. And based on my conversations that I have with my peers across the country, virtually every single day, San Antonio is on as strong a foundation as any city in the country to come back stronger from this. So I hope you are optimistic about the future in San Antonio. I think it's well justified. As we said from the start, the sun also rises, and it is a bright, shiny day on the horizon for San Antonio. And I look forward to working with you and serving alongside you in the future. Thank you all very much for having me today.
Thank you, Mayor. We know you have a hard stop at 1. So thank you again. We appreciate you. I've got some closing comments, but thanks again for joining us. Good luck, and keep up the great work. We'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank again the mayor. He joined us. He's been extremely busy, but he's always got time to share with us some thoughts. And so that's fantastic. I'd like to, of course, thank our partners, the Alamo Asian American Chamber of Commerce and the San Antonio Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. This is a partnership with them, and we appreciate that partnership and thank them for tuning in. And of course, to all of you and our sponsors. Our sponsors are so key in allowing us to do our work. Before I go, though, I want to remind you about a couple of things that we've got coming up. Next week, April the 15th, we've got an event called Beyond the Ballot, where we're featuring freshman Congressman Tony Gonzalez. He has hit the ground running in the 117th Congress. He has very important leadership positions, and he's going to talk to us about his thoughts and what's in for the future on the federal level. I'd also like to announce that we have secured our San Antonio to DC, SA to DC fly-in to our nation's capital. It's going to be in the fall, October 19th to the 22nd. A lot more information coming soon, but suffice it to say, now's the time for us to be able to get to DC. So many things happening in DC, a lot of dollars flowing all around, and we want to make sure that we're capturing our piece for our city. And the best way to do it is by seeing them personally and getting in front of them to ask and advocate on behalf of this community. And then finally, I'll remind us that early voting for the May election begins April the 19th and runs through the 27th. Please get out, make your voice heard. That's what this country is based on, is getting our voice heard and that ability to vote. So please do that. And with that, I say thank you for joining us again. Be safe, be kind, be healthy. And from all of us at the San Antonio Chamber of Commerce, have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.